All right, so this is CNIT 128, Hacking Mobile Devices. And it's a pretty big class, right? We have a lot of more students than usual here in person, which is fine. And as a matter of fact, most of my other classes, almost nobody comes in person, like just 2 people, and most people just tune in online, which is perfectly fine. You don't need to come in person unless you want to use computers here, and that may be necessary for this class, although I'm thinking I will set up some of those computers to be remotely controlled so people can work from home, because I've had COVID a couple times, and when I taught face-to-face just a few weeks ago, I got sick, a bunch of my students got sick, a bunch of the other teachers were sick. It was just a mess. I think everything should be doable from home these days because COVID is still such a problem. So I'm thinking I'll just rig up a few machines so you can remotely control them in the lab if your machines are too weak. And I'll have more details about that next week probably. However, there are some machines here. There's a lot of labs sitting empty. And so some people may prefer to work here. We can probably work something like that out. Anyway. So if you come to add the class, just make a request online to add it, and I'll just approve them. I'm letting everybody in. It doesn't matter. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to cover how to hack mobile devices, primarily Android, because it's very hard to get practice hands-on with iOS. The problem is there is no virtual machine that runs iOS that is legal and works. And the only way to do it is to buy phones, real phones, and hack them. And I've even done that a couple times, and that hasn't worked out so well either. And so mostly we're just going to do Android. We're going to do the theory of iOS, which, by the way, is very much like Android. But Android, there are free emulators. You can run a simulated Android virtual machine. You can totally practice analyzing the security of apps and the operating system in a virtual machine, and that's what we're going to do for most of the projects. So we'll talk about jailbreaking, rooting, NFTSX, malware, browser exploitation, and all the other sort of attacks. And so there's a textbook. It's a very good book, by the way, the Mobile Application Hacker's Handbook is one of the standards. It explains things in great detail, so there'll be lectures from the book and quizzes on what's in the book. And there's a whole lot of hands-on projects and a discussion board in Canvas. You should be putting discussions in. And as always, there is a ton of extra credit. So let me point out the projects here and give you the good news and the bad news. The good news is, if you're not used to my classes, there's a ton of extra credit. 10 points here, 40 points there, another 40 points there, and then pretty soon it's all extra credit. Just tons and tons of extra credit projects. So you can make up for quizzes and discussions you didn't do and just anything by doing more hands-on projects. The bad news is these are really hard. The really hard part is right at the start. It is painful to get your Android emulator going. By the way, another option you could do is just get a cheap Android tablet for like $40 and have a real Android device. That would be fine instead of getting the emulator going. The emulators are tough to get going. They depend on your hardware. So I always have students suffering greatly trying to run emulators on junky old machines that don't work very well. I mean, if you have a Mac or native Linux on the hard metal, you're probably okay. But if all you have is Windows, you'll have some trouble, although the Windows emulators are better than they used to be. And supposedly, one of these days, Windows 11 is going to have native Android emulation built right in, but somehow that never seems to quite get ready. It's not really generally available yet. I thought that would be awesome, but I don't think you can get it yet unless you're on the dev channel and it's just in early beta, and so it's probably just as much of a mess of all these other ones. Anyway, so I got it working. For example, I got an M1 here. I cannot run an emulator on the M1. I can't find any way to run an Android emulator on the M1, which, by the way, is pretty hilarious because Android runs on ARM. And the current emulators emulate ARM on Intel. But if your underlying operating system, your underlying hardware is ARM, there's no emulator available, which is seriously messed up. But the Genymotion says they'll have one sometime next year. Anyway, so I'm remotely controlling my Intel Mac from home to do demos for the time being, and we'll get there. So depending on your setup, you can set up for Mac or Linux with Genymotion and Burp, and on Windows, there's other things you use like BlueStacks and Nox to get emulators. And these things change a lot, and these projects are now a year or 2 old, so there probably will be bugs in them. These 2 I know work. I got them working today. I'm going to be updating them as we go ahead, but if you work ahead, you will probably encounter bugs. Please let me know. They keep changing everything. Unfortunately, a lot of the bugs can't be fixed. And by the way, here's something maddening. Kirk is one of our more advanced students. He could do stuff nobody else could do, because the secret to get Android emulators working on Windows is when you hit trouble, you have to downgrade to earlier versions of VirtualBox. Because the way they all work is they took VirtualBox, which is open source, and then they modified it a little. And so if you try to reach in and manipulate your machines with VirtualBox to set the network settings or something, you often have to downgrade to much earlier versions of VirtualBox to be compatible with whatever they did in there, and they don't tell you. So anyway, it can be quite a challenge. If you have a Mac or Linux, life is relatively easy. Anyway, so let me go back to the summary, see if there's anything else worth saying. There's an email address. You can, well, most you can just send a message inside Canvas, but if you want to send in things by email, you can. There's no physical attendance required. All the quizzes are online, and all the homework, you just email in screenshots and flags you find, so you can do all that from anywhere. And there are people usually taking this class from China and Germany and all kinds of places like that, which is fine. So there's things due, but there's no late penalty until 9/19, I think, or 9/12, after the ad period's over. Yeah, no late penalty until after 9/11. So yeah, that star shouldn't be there. Anyway, so this is the first day. If you want to stay on track, you should start doing the projects and reading chapters, taking quizzes next week. But if not, you might still be adding. So I put the, I will not punish you for being late. And there's a chart someplace of grading. Maybe I can't find it. One time I had a, all right, don't see it. But anyway, what happens is there's a certain number of points for everything, and 90%'s an A, and 80%'s a B, and 60%'s a C. And I'll find that chart and add it by next week. Somehow I have lost it. Should be right here, but it ain't. So, all right. So that's a summary of the class. So are there any questions about that kind of stuff? Let me check for online questions in Twitch. People say they can hear me. An old Samsung phone? Yes, you probably can. Yes. You may have to root it for some of the projects, but you certainly, if you have an old Android phone, you can certainly do some of the projects on there. Genymotion works on your Mac. Yeah, Genymotion is good on the Mac. Raspberry Pi, they can install Android on them. Well, that sounds great. I know, yeah, that would probably be fine. If you run Android on a Raspberry Pi, you can use that. It'd essentially be the same as a tablet, I guess. I don't know. Sounds great, though. If you demonstrate it to us and show us how it works, it's worth extra credit. That would be a fun project. All right, and trouble with the BERT project, should use Nexus 6 with, yes, use Nexus 6 with Android 5.1. That's what I recommend. Nothing later than Android 5.1, or you won't be able to install the certificate. But anyway, I'll be demonstrating that later, and we can talk about it. Good. So, all right, let me stop this recording and make a separate one.